Yeah, we back. Yeah, we back. Now, welcome back to a brand new series, man. In this series, we are reading the biography of King Henri Christophe, one of the greatest black men to ever walk the face of the earth. Now, like I said, start back from the beginning, start at part 1 so everything makes sense. Part 1, we discussed the origins. Part 2, we discussed where was he in the first days of the revolution. Part 3, we discussed the rise to power. Part 4, we discussed the French invasion of 1802. Part 5, we discussed the various battles of the revolution leading up to the victorious climax. Now, part 6, we are now in the first days of the new Haitian state, right? Dessalines is in power, commander-in-chief, and Christophe is the governor of the north, right? Christophe is the commander of the north, but Dessalines, he's the commander-in-chief. Now, let's get back into the book, man. With Haiti's internal enemies defeated, Dessalines now turned his thoughts to the National Defense Plan. In 1804, he ordered that the interior of the nation be fortified with a chain of nearly 30 mountaintop military fortresses. Should France attempt another invasion, the coastal ports would be destroyed and the army retreat to the fortresses to wage guerrilla war. Haiti was divided into 6 military divisions, with each commanding general responsible for building the strongholds in the area. As commander of the North Division, Christophe was given the largest workload, with a total of 8 forts to be built. Forts were ordered to be built at the old maroon stronghold of Gonrivière. Above Millau would stand Fort La Ferrière, and to the east, Fort Secatière. Fort Brave and Fort Jalousière would guard Marmelade, while the road that led south over the mountains from the town of Limbé was to be protected by Fort Dahomey and Fort Bayonnaise. Shout out to the kingdom of Dahomey back on the continent. Apparently Dessalines had one of the forts named Fort Dahomey. So, shout out to the family on the continent. Anyway, let's continue. Together they formed a protective chain along the mountains bordering the northern plains, while the southernmost outpost only a short distance from the group of 5 forts that Dessalines ordered to protect his new capital, the town of Machan, in the heart of the Artibonite Valley. Even before the order was issued, Christophe had begun to move Capa arsenal to the interior. The city's businesses were shuttered for 2 days, and almost the entire civilian population was pressed into service to carry arms and ammunition 20 kilometers inland. The work was overseen by Colonel Noel Joachim, who Christophe also chose to manage the most ambitious construction project of all, Fort La Ferrière, later to be known as Citadel Henri, or more simply, the Citadel. Now, I'm going to take some footage from African Tigress, the YouTuber African Tigress, when she took a visit to the Citadel a couple months back. As you can see, the Citadel live and direct up close. I guess in this part of the book, we're going to be talking about the construction of the Citadel. Let's get back into it. While the majority of the forts built during this time were relatively simple affairs, everything about the Citadel was to be superlative. Its location was the most imperious in the country, atop the long, narrow ridge of Pic La Ferrière mountain, above Christophe's old stronghold at Millau. At over 900 meters high, the peak was frequently swathed in clouds, but on a clear day, it commanded views to Cap Haïtien and out to sea, and south across the mountains into the interior. When completed, the fort would eventually cover 15,000 square meters, making it the largest fortress in all of the Americas. Its multi-level batteries were at the cutting edge of military architecture, providing a murderous field of fire for those sides of the Citadel not protected by a precipitous mountain drop, while also protecting the slopes on which crops could be grown for supplies against a siege. Water came from a series of massive cisterns and an internal moat that further protected the fort's interior. The walls eventually towered 45 meters high and were never less than 4 meters thick. 1 kilometer away at the southern end of the mountain ridge was a series of 4 redoubts, collectively called Fort Ramière, protecting the approach from Dondon. Christophe's chief of engineers was Henri. The National Defense Plan kept him in constant demand, and Christophe wrote to him regularly on the building of the forts in Marmelade, on one instance ordering him to send a team of carpenters and other workers to the town of Machan on Dessalines' request. Another engineer, Faro, was left to oversee the day-to-day construction of the Citadel alongside Colonel Joachim, with Christophe as project manager, ensuring that the works were run with military precision. Christophe's letters at the time show a constant barrage of instructions, ordering materials and provisions, assigning laborers and blacksmiths, and chiding any officers who failed to meet his strict standards. Work on this site was driven at a ferocious pace, and by the end of 1804, the national newspaper, the Political and Commercial Gazette of Haiti, could already know with satisfaction Haiti's new unassailable citadels rising above the clouds, and pay particular tribute to Christophe's achievement in mounting his cannons in the most formidable position. When Christophe became king in 1811, he made Faro a baron and named him Director of Engineers. His coat of arms bore a pair of architect's dividers with the motto, citadel Henri. Christophe also gave thought to a home for his own family. His wife, Marie-Louise, and her children were spending much of their time in Gonaives with Madame Dessalines, where shortages of essentials made for a rude contrast with the banquets of the first months of independence. Christophe's wife said, "I beg you to have the laundry woman hurry with my linen, for the children and I are on the point of being without any, and you know it is difficult to get washing done here. The sugar that you told me to expect has not yet arrived. This delay grieves us very much, since we had awaited it impatiently, and especially Madame Dessalines, who was expecting her mirrors by the same boat." Their house in Capa was ruined, so Christophe set about building a mansion in Millau, from where he could oversee construction of the citadel. Although no description of the residence survives, it is possible that Joachim was influenced by his commanding officer when building a villa of his own in Millau, which one visiting American described as being pleasantly situated with the piazza in front and a flower garden in the back, with a parlor decorated with engravings of military leaders, including George Washington. Now, time out, man. Why the hell did Prince Joachim have George Washington hanging up in the crib, man? Christophe should have Christophe should have pistol whipped him for that. He was tripping. You see, Christophe, when they described Christophe's mansion, they described Christophe had a bunch of portraits hanging up on the wall of African gods and African kings and African mythology. And here comes Prince Joachim, with different military leaders and George Washington hanging up in the crib. Tripping, bro. Tripping. Let's continue. In August, news arrived that Napoleon Bonaparte had declared himself Emperor of France. Boistonnerre and another of Dessalines' secretaries, Gishan Lat, decided that the governor-general could not be outshone by the man whose armies they had vanquished, and proposed that Haiti should also become an empire. Within a week, letters had been sent out to the generals, asking them to sign a letter nominating Dessalines to become Emperor Jacques I. The official declaration was then backdated to January to remove any sign of French influence. The coronation was held on 8th of October in Port-au-Prince, exactly 1 year to the day after Dessalines had liberated the city. The celebrations began before dawn, with the most tremendous roar of cannons and musketry, according to an American supercargo who witnessed the event. In front of the army and almost the entire population of the city, Christophe read the act nominating Dessalines as emperor for life, although the noise of the excited crowd made it almost impossible for him to be heard. After the oath of office, Dessalines led his troops on foot to the cathedral to attend mass. That night, the city thronged with a crowd that danced, sang, and leaped through the streets. The following morning, Dessalines and Christophe traveled to Cap Haïtien, where the celebrations were repeated and a victory arch erected in the emperor's honor. When the celebration had subsided, Dessalines wrote a letter to Napoleon Bonaparte. In an extraordinary broadside, he professed regret at the lessons taught to him by General Charles Leclerc and Rochambeau, and the fate of Toussaint meant that he could find no Haitian willing to travel to France as his ambassador, not least while Bonaparte regarded him as a rebel and a brigand rather than the leader of a free nation. He urged Bonaparte to forget his desires to conquer the island, whose shores are forever closed to you, and instead proposed a peace deal in the most provocative manner possible. Dessalines asked Bonaparte to return his sister Pauline, Leclerc's widow, to Haiti so that the two of them could marry and the Haitian people could see the widow of the vanquished in the arms of the victor, and the Corsican blood which would join with the black in their children. Dessalines was trolling. Dessalines was trolling Napoleon. Let's continue. Dessalines' aggressive tone reflected a frustration that while he had dealt with the French in Haiti, his new empire was still threatened by the presence of a French garrison on the eastern part of the island. Its commander at Santo Domingo, General Jean-Louis Ferrand, a French general, remained determined to take war to the Haitians in whatever way he could. He outfitted privateers to carry out raids along the coast, and on capturing one Haitian vessel, had its entire crew murdered. In early 1805, he announced plans to capture any rebels found along the border and sell them into slavery. For French General Ferrand, only repentant submission to Bonaparte could bring an end to the hostility. But for Dessalines, only one final victory over France could bring his new empire the peace it deserved. Plans for an attack on Santo Domingo were finalized in the town of Machan during the celebrations held to mark the first year of Haiti's independence. 5,000 troops formed up in silent ranks on a freshly prepared parade ground, along with every officer of significance from the Revolutionary War, to pay homage to their victory. Christophe led the military salute, drilling the soldiers with such precision that when ordered to kneel after presenting their arms, the entire crowd also fell to the ground. After a mass volley of 200 cannons, Boistonnerre gave a speech filled with fiery denunciations of the French. The expectation was that the expedition would be launched at the end of the rainy season. The British heard rumors of it in October, but declined to offer the naval blockade that they had provided a year earlier. In Cap Haïtien, Christophe began to ready his soldiers. Always proud of his army's appearance, he wrote to Dessalines that he had ordered 10,000 new uniforms to be made. Tailors were chosen for their skills and their ability to source sufficient quantities of blue cloth, while women were pressed in the service sewing new shirts. No detail was too small for Christophe's attention, and for the next 3 weeks, he sent out a constant stream of orders to his officers. Troops were drilled, ammunition was prepared, rations of biscuits and saltfish were issued, and border security was tightened. On the 13th of February, 1805, Christophe finally received detailed orders from Dessalines for the campaign. Christophe's force was one of 3 columns set to converge on Santo Domingo, with Dessalines leading a division from the town of Machan and Pichon leading a third from Port-au-Prince. His route involved capturing several towns along the way, but the start of the campaign suggested that the weather would be an equally tough opponent. While the south of the island was drying out, the north had received heavy rain. Local floods meant that it took 2 days for Christophe to reach his chosen muster point at Fort Liberté. In some places, his soldiers had to follow the coastline, marching chest deep in the waves, while elsewhere, engineers were deployed to break down riverbanks to allow the artillery to proceed. The French settlements in Santo Domingo nearest the border had been abandoned by the time Christophe arrived, and it was not until a week into the campaign, when the column reached Santiago, that any military resistance was encountered. A very lively battle ensued, with Christophe losing as many troops crossing the town's swollen river as in the actual fight. After the French troops fled in disarray, Christophe was left to conquer a series of ghost towns. In Cotuí, only the priests remained to help guide his army to a safe crossing point on the river. To hold the area, Christophe left in charge his Spanish-speaking brigade chief, Jose Campos Tavares, who had been born and enslaved in Santiago, with strict instructions to take a full census of the local district's people and livestock. The northern column reached Santo Domingo on the 10th of March to find the city's walls already invested by Dessalines and Pichon. Christophe was instructed to set up camp on the uncultivated left bank of the Ozama River, with the city's harbor and his shipping within range of his guns. A constant barrage from the Haitian cannons quickly forced the ships to take shelter on the open sea, and in a dispatch to Dessalines, Christophe confidently reported that the shells and musket fire were forcing the city's residents to take cover on all fours, while the cries of drowning sailors had been heard well into the night. The French general had evacuated much of the city's civilian population to reduce the number of mouths he had to feed, leaving him with a garrison of 800 men, plus a further 1,500 militia. He felt more confident in his position. The brigands are always under the walls, and I have reason to believe that they are more disgusted than us at a siege that they did not foresee to be so hard. His own cannon could still return fire against Christophe's position, and he was able to send out 2 large sorties against the lines, manned by Pichon's commander, General Magny. At times, the fighting was at such close quarters that bayonets were more useful than muskets. Both sides took significant casualties, but it was only when General Nicolas Geffroy arrived to reinforce the Haitian position with his army at the south the day after that the French general may have started to worry about Santo Domingo's fate. Over 3 weeks, the siege slipped into a slow and steady rhythm of barrages and counter-skirmishes. There is nothing new worthy of reporting, Christophe wrote to Dessalines, except that I've been doing a lot of shooting this morning. Dessalines ordered mining work to be carried out to weaken the city's walls, and at a general staff meeting on the 26th of March, ordered a full assault for the following day. But when the troops were at their reveille the next morning, it suddenly became clear that the attack on Santo Domingo was to be no triumphant rerun of the fall of Cap Français. French sails had been spotted on the horizon. A month earlier, a naval squadron sent to the Caribbean to harass British shipping had recaptured Dominica, and by chance, its admiral had chosen this moment to call at Santo Domingo before returning to France. Fearful that the ships were part of a much larger armada intent on reconquering Haiti, Dessalines ordered an immediate withdrawal. The Haitian army quietly abandoned their position and departed in the greatest silence, such that the French did not immediately realize the siege had been lifted. The retreat at least provided an opportunity to put into action Dessalines' scorched earth policy to deny the invaders any advantage. Before the proposed assault on the city, his generals ordered their men to muster all the Spanish inhabitants and their livestock they could find to make back to Haiti. Christophe had his troops comb the woods for runaways and arranged them into a convoy to be marched back to the northern sugar plantations that were so chronically short of labor. They would also be put to work on the fort building program. He wrote ahead to the commander at Guanamef to prepare plantains, potatoes, and cassava for around 600 Spanish prisoners who would be sent to work on the citadel. To guard against the French attack, orders were also sent to the fort to prepare artillery and have any remaining gunpowder at Capa removed to the interior. As Christophe retreated north through Cotuí, Vega, and Santiago, he had each town systematically razed. When his troops finally arrived back at their barracks, they brought with them 1,600 prisoners of both sexes, 700 children under the age of 15, plus a French surgeon, 5 priests, and all the livestock they could muster. The French invasion never came, but the fear of an attack pushed Christophe to demand ever faster progress on the citadel. For much of the next 6 months, he was a constant presence at the site. Every commander in the north was ordered to send him 25 workers from each plantation, with a particular call for masons and carpenters. The Spanish prisoners were screened to find wheelwrights or blacksmiths to meet the fort's insatiable demand for skilled labor. The citadel became an enormous mountaintop labor camp, with a spell on site there the punishment for any Haitian soldier guilty of indiscipline. Several of Cap-Haïtien's remaining French citizens who were deemed a security risk were also sent to the work site. The forced location posed its own challenges. An endless chain of porters carried building supplies to the mountaintop, from bricks scavenged from ruined French plantation buildings to the sugarcane whose juice was mixed with sand and lime to make mortar, and the barrels of herrings that fed the workforce. Arming the citadel was even more of a trial. Christophe ordered the coastal forts stripped of their artillery to be sent to the interior, and he obsessed over the making of gun carriages for their transport and installation, and a sufficient provision of ropes for the mammoth task of hauling them up the mountain. The majority of the artillery pieces weighed over 2.5 tons, and many of them double that. But in total, over 163 cannons and mortars were ultimately sent to the citadel, along with an equally epic supply of cannonballs. In amassing such a battery, Christophe created an inadvertent tribute to the convoluted history of the Haitian Revolution. Some cannons bore a French royal coat of arms, while others carried Republican mottos from revolutionary Paris, or had been captured from Naples during Napoleon's war against Italy. Spanish and British artillery were also added. The citadel's oldest cannon dated from 1719 and was decorated with the coat of arms of the Duke of Marlborough. Haiti's new imperial constitution was published in May, along with an accompanying penal code. On the morning of June 16th, Christophe held a general levee in Cap-Haïtien, where he was pleased to tell Dessalines that the assembled crowd had listened to his reading of the documents in the most profound silence, until erupting at his conclusion with 1,000 cries of "Long live the Majesty, the Emperor." The opening section of the Constitution summoned up a free and sovereign state that permanently banned slavery, the first country in the modern world to do so. All citizens were to be equal under the law, irrespective of their color, though all would be designated black, and every man was urged to be a good father, a good son, a good husband, and above all, a good soldier. As Dessalines had suggested to the British, no foreigner was permitted to own land or manage a plantation. The celebrations were marred by the death of the previous week of General Clairvaux after a short illness. Clairvaux was only a few years older than Christophe, who mourned the loss of his friend of liberty. The French Surgeon General Justement, who was also close to Clairvaux and attended him in his final hour, later claimed that Christophe had him poisoned. Haitian historians in the mid-19th century seized upon this story to confirm their prejudices against Christophe, but irrespective of the cause of Clairvaux's death, the passing of the one and main signatories of independence only strengthened Christophe's own position. Now, time out. In the book, when it says Haitian historians of the mid-19th century, a lot of those Haitian historians of the mid-19th century were actually the descendants of Christophe's enemies, right? Later on in the book, I'm sure they're going to discuss when Christophe was the king of the north and the nation was split between the north and the south. A lot of the so-called Haitian historians that dominate the narrative from the mid-19th century were actually the partisans of the Southern Republic that was the enemy of Christophe during his time in power. So yes, that's why they mention their prejudices against Christophe, because a lot of the narrative that's been, the dominant narrative on Christophe has been inaccurate, because the ones who control the narrative are his enemies. Now, let's continue. When Dessalines announced a military reorganization the following month, Christophe was named as the head of the entire army. General Paul Romain was given command of Clairvaux's old division. Christophe was now comfortably the second most powerful man in Haiti. Prior to his promotion, Christophe had toured the Northwest on a military inspection. He had expected to find the same brisk efficiency with which he had ran Milo, but was soon dismayed. The trip revealed neglected plantations and the regiment at Mont-Saint-Nicolas so struck down by desertions and in such disorder that Christophe could not review them for a parade. Work had not yet begun at the site chosen for Fort Trois Pavillons in the hills above Port-de-Paix. The officer in command was replaced by Christophe loyalists, and 100 soldiers from the garrison were immediately dispatched to work on the new fort, along with 2 workers from every plantation in the area. But the malaise was an early sign of a wider dissatisfaction across the north. Within months, Christophe was active again across the area, as rumors of voodoo dances and conspiracies against the government swirled around the north, and increasing numbers of workers were marooned from the plantations. The Empire of Haiti was barely a year old, and its greatest challenge was about to come knocking on Christophe's door. Christophe was with Dessalines in the town of Machan in January 1806 to mark the second anniversary of Haitian independence. Foreign merchants gossiped afterwards that the centerpiece of their banquet was the sugar skeleton of a white man. The two of them were finally beginning to feel confident, and despite France's continuing presence in Santo Domingo, Haiti's foreign enemies were on the back foot. A Royal Navy campaign in the Caribbean was disrupting French shipping. And on the 11th of January, they gleefully learned that Napoleon Bonaparte's navy had been definitively smashed at the Battle of Trafalgar. It was now to the task of state building as the two of them turned, and it was here that tensions would arise so quickly that the Haitian Empire would struggle to survive the year. The malaise that Christophe had uncovered at Mont Saint Nicolas was an early indicator of trouble. The problem arose from the question of liberty. What did freedom mean for a new country in a world of colonial slavery? Dessalines and Christophe believed that the military was the only guarantee of freedom won through the revolution, and the only way to build a strong country was to rebuild the plantations and put trade at the heart of its foreign relations. The more sugar and coffee Haiti could export, the more gunpowder it could buy. The imperial constitution thus put order and duty at the heart of nation building, with its citizens destined to defend the revolution by becoming either good farmers or good soldiers. Dessalines and Christophe had risen to prominence under Toussaint, and their project was to create a new nation from scratch, a continuation of the ideals he espoused as Governor General of Saint Domingo. But to the foot soldiers of the revolution, the majority of whom had been born in Africa and undergone the Middle Passage, freedom had a complete different meaning. Freedom for them meant individual liberty, and if they were to labor, it would be to cultivate their own plots, left alone in self-sufficiency, rather than to be forced to labor for someone else. But here's the thing, time out. Here's the thing the ancestors didn't understand. You weren't laboring for someone else. You were laboring to build your nation. But like I said, like the book said, a good chunk of the population was born on the continent, survived the Middle Passage. So they don't really see this nation as their nation, though they conquered it through the force of arms. A lot of them still want to go back home, right? They want to go back home, man. They want to go back to Guinea. They want to go back to Senegal. They want to go back to Mali. They want to go back to, they want to go back to wherever they came from, man. So like I said, I mentioned it before, man. This is going to be a point of contention because the concept of nation building is going to be a controversial topic, right? Dessalines and Christophe like, yo, we got to build a nation. We got to get it popping. A lot of folks like, man, I don't want to be here for real, bro. I want to go back home. I'm glad we won the war. I'm happy we won the war. I was fighting to go back home. And then a lot of folks, some folks are like, listen, I was fighting to have my own nation. So that's the disagreement here. Now let's continue. Later dubbed the counter-plantation movement by the Haitian historian Jean Casimir, this was the liberty that sparked Moise's revolt against Toussaint and animated Maroon leaders like Sanssouci and Petit Noel Pierre. For Christophe, these were figures from the past. He had fought them all and come out triumphant, and believed their ideas had no place in the country that he was helping Dessalines build. Christophe said, work never dishonors a free man. But the struggle to convince the people so recently in bondage to follow his maxim would occupy him for years to come and tear Haiti into two in the process. Reliable estimates are hard to come by, but the years of war may have reduced Haiti's pre-1791 population around 500,000 by a third, and possibly by even more. For leaders like Christophe, who also needed manpower to complete the defensive forts, it was a challenge to find enough people, not just to work in the fields, but also to enforce the labor system. For farmers and soldiers hoping to strike out on their own, this was less a problem than an opportunity. While many chose to go maroon in the sparsely populated interior where they could make new lives for themselves undisturbed by the state, others took refuge on islands off the coast. In November 1805, Christophe directed General Capa to clear out an infinity of soldiers and cultivators who were hiding in the marshy inlets near Fort Liberté. At other times, he sent soldiers to disrupt the informal maroon economy by destroying the canoes of independent coastal traders, or to arrest those ranching wild cattle or depriving the state of tax revenue by illegally logging dyewood. The old practice of running away from the plantation but staying nearby to be with family soon returned. The discovery of Maroons living near Petit Anse, so close to Capa, illustrates the problems the authorities had trying to control the workforce. Complaining about having to return cultivators who are regularly absconding from one location to the other, Christophe sighed that no sooner were they chased out the door, they returned through the window. To crack down on the problem, Dessalines ordered the resurrection of Toussaint's identity cards, each bearing the individual's name, age, and place of residence. The extent to which the passes were issued remained patchy, but anyone caught not carrying one was in theory liable to arrest. The Spanish prisoners from the Santo Domingo campaign had proved to be poor workers. Those on plantations near the border had to be moved to the interior to stop them from trying to escape back to their homes. The remaining French and Cap were largely allowed to go about their business until April 1806, when 6 of them fled to the Spanish part of the island by canoe. One of the escapees was Norbert Thouret, a tailor who had won the favor of both Christophe and Dessalines by sewing their uniforms along with his wife. Christophe ordered all the French in the city to be rounded up as punishment. Christophe said, I have sent all the white men and women of this town to live in the mountains under the responsibility of the military commanders, who will distribute the women to the various plantations where they will be under the supervision of the managers and drivers, and the men to the various fortifications to work. The crackdown was so severe that Christophe had to reassure Capa foreign merchants that no action will be taken against them. The restrictions on labor and movement meant land that should have been growing crops proved fertile ground for uneasiness and anxiety. When a rumor began to spread that Dessalines planned to enslave Haitian children, Christophe quickly ordered the person who started the rumor to be shot by a firing squad. Anti-slavery was a cornerstone of Haitian independence, and the militarized nature of state agriculture left the nation's founders acutely sensitive to accusations that their system was in any way analogous to the colonial slave system. Now, first of all, it could never be analogous because you are not working for the metropole of Paris. You are working to build a nation for yourself and your descendants. And on top of that, you're being paid a wage. You're being paid a share of the profits. So it's in no way analogous. At the end of the day, if you want my analysis, I believe that some of the ancestors, they wanted to go home. They did not want to engage in nation building. Even if they were paid to do so, they wanted to go home. And because of that, that led to a lot of friction and tension at certain times. And though I understand the desire of the general population to want to be left alone and do your own thing, but after, 10, 15 years of war, several cities torched to the ground and burned to the ground, you have to rebuild the nation by yourself. And like I said, nobody's coming to save you. Nobody coming to help you. No foreign aid coming. No IMF coming. No World Bank coming. Nothing. Nobody's going to come give you a loan. So you have to get it out the mud. You have to get it out the mud and build it from the ground up. Right? So let's continue. Christophe's accusations against General Capa had not come out of a vacuum. It was Capa who was the general overseeing the Northwest when Christophe made his inspection there and found the garrisons in disorder. He had been regarded as a potential threat by his general and emperor ever since. A raid by French troops on the border town of Wanament in October 1806 provided him with the opportunity to deal with him once and for all. Now, I believe they're going to talk about the assassination of General Capa. Like I mentioned with Toussaint, some episodes back, when I spoke about his assassination of Moise, when he killed Moise, I even said that, listen, there's no defending that. I can't defend that, That's a blemish on the record. Right here, the assassination of Capa, same thing with Christophe, man. That's a blemish on the record, man. It is what it is. Let's continue. Christophe was near naive when he learned of the raid and rushed to the border, only to find that Capa had already repelled the skirmishes. In a dispatch to Dessalines, Christophe chose to take full credit for the victory, and after helping to secure the border, Capa was ordered back to Cap Haitien. He never arrived. Before his departure, Christophe summoned his generals, Paul Romain and D'Artignac, for a meeting. On the 10th of October, they surprised Capa on the road at Limonade and had their soldiers taken prisoner. Capa said, "Your master Christophe is lucky to have caught me in such a trap." Capa reportedly cried as he realized his fate was sealed. "Finish it quickly," he said. Moments later, he was dead. The following day, Christophe wrote to Dessalines that they had carried out your order and that Capa's 3 aides-de-camp were now in his custody. Now, I've never heard this story before. I never heard about Dessalines being involved in the assassination of Capa. I don't know, man. I don't know. Keep in mind, this book was written by a British man. So I don't know what sources he has. I never heard that story of Dessalines being involved in that. So I'm just going to leave that with an asterisk or a grain of salt. But let's continue. Romain rushed to Capa's stronghold of Port-de-Paix to quell any potential trouble from his old regiment, and any threat imagined from the hero at the Battle of Vertières was extinguished for good. Dessalines' satisfaction at the elimination of a potential rival proved short-lived. On the same day, an even greater threat to his rule was taking shape in the south of Haiti. His plans for state ownership of plantations had been piloted by Christophe in the north, but when he attempted to replicate a system for the south, it was met with severe resistance. Southern Haiti was a very different place to the north. It remained the power base of the old, wealthy, free, mixed-race class who had prospered under André Rigaud and had been crushed during the War of Knives, in no small part due to the actions of Dessalines and Christophe. Now they believed their interests were threatened again. Just as the abandonment of plantations during the Revolution had allowed the black officer class to grow rich, so the free mixed-race officers had acquired more land in the South and the West. Their mercantile background created a different vision of Haiti to Dessalines' imperial project, one rooted in private property rights and individual liberty rather than one of national defense through a centralized state. When the emperor toured the region in the summer of 1806, he complained that the registration of land titles, a precursor to nationalization, had barely begun. He demanded the process be speeded up, and in doing so, he helped spark the revolt that brought down his entire empire. Time out. Once again, Once again, for the third time, the white man's son hating on the black man, right? It first happened back in 1796 when Villat, you remember back in like part 2, we talk about Villat and the other mixed race officers stormed into the governor's house to arrest Laveau because they felt that they were being left out. They felt the black officer class was getting too many privileges. Then you remember in 1799, the War of Knives, Andre Rigaud attacked Toussaint, and then Toussaint, Dessalines, and Christophe had to crush them and send them into exile. Then they came back with the French army in 1802. Now, once again, the sons of the white man back again, sabotaging the black man. Let's continue. Complaints about Dessalines' rule had been festering in the South for several months, but it took his new orders to bring them out in the open. First among the complaints was General Etienne Gérin from Ansavo. Gérin was the Minister of War and one of the signatories to the Haitian independence, but he had originally been a colonel under Rigaud. Dessalines' southern tour crystallized the fears of both Gérin and Alexander Pichot in Port-au-Prince that the land reforms were a grave threat to their power base. Rumors began to spread that the emperor's real aim was the complete elimination of the old free-colored mixed-race class altogether. Shortly after Dessalines began to push forward his southern land reforms, disorder broke out in the town of Lecaille. An imperial land inspector was beheaded, which was the trigger for the city's military command to declare themselves a revolt. It was the first stage in a carefully planned rebellion. Within days, almost the entire southern peninsula rose up. Etienne Gérin praised the actions of the mutineers and delivered a broadside against Dessalines' tyranny. The families of planters were being stripped of their property and thrown in the streets, and troops were left unpaid while the ammunition needed to defend the country was wasted on lavish imperial parades, Etienne Gérin accused Dessalines. Haiti was being trampled on by an oriental despot who would make even the French butchers blush. Liberty, good God, is a vain word in this country, Etienne Gérin said. Now, time out. Etienne Gérin is a mixed race man who is so mixed that he could pass for white, right? He's somebody who could pass for white. He was based in the South. He used to be a disciple of Andre Rigaud, the same Andre Rigaud that fought against Toussaint in that civil war back in 1799 when they tried to overthrow Toussaint, but they got crushed. So as you can see, Etienne Gérin is obviously biased. Etienne Gérin obviously has a bone to pick with the northern black generals, especially when they got smashed back in 1799. You know, so yeah, as you can see, Etienne Gérin slandering Dessalines in the national media. Let's continue. Colonel Wagnac, commandant at Lecaille, was equally clear when he said, "The people have risen up en masse. We have drawn the sword, and we shall not put it back in the scabbard until you order it." The person to whom Gérin and Wagnac addressed their declarations was Christophe. They dispatched their letters by ship to Capa and pleaded with him to intervene in their favor, flattering him that they had always looked up to him as the next in line to the throne. They pledged to recognize Christophe as the new head of the empire if he could help overthrow Dessalines. Christophe is not thought to have received the letters. The letter book of his daily correspondence at the time contains no reply, and the only recorded letters he sent in subsequent days are a Prozac round of orders regarding runaway cultivators and the continued construction of the citadel. When he did learn of the rebellion on the 16th of October, Christophe wrote to Dessalines of his hope that he would deploy the severity of the law against the authors of the catastrophe. On the same day, Gérin, Pétion, and almost the entire army command in the South and West signed a document at Port-au-Prince entitled Resistance to Oppression, pronouncing the Dessalines regime to be dead. Once again, man, just like back in 1796, when they tried to overthrow the Laveau regime, in 1799, when they tried to overthrow the Toussaint regime, now in 1806, the same mixed race generals from the South, they trying to overthrow the Dessalines regime. And in 1820, they gonna do the same thing when they overthrow the Christophe regime. Man, the white man's son, goddamn. It's already bad enough the white Frenchmen violated our women to create these abominations. Now, the products of these abominations and these sexual assaults are now a thorn in our side, right? It's like adding insult to injury. It's bad enough you violated our mothers and our grandmothers and created these half-breeds, but now these same offspring you created are now causing us constant problems and constantly raising the standard of war against us. Now let's continue. The document drew heavily on liberal French Republican ideals to offer a manifesto on what a Haiti freed from dictatorial rule could look like. Now the white man's son then drew inspiration from the French Republican ideals. Oh God. Now keep in mind, the same generals who fought against Toussaint, who fought against Dessalines, and who fought against Christophe, they're the same ones in 20 years from now. They're the same ones who signed a deal to agree to pay reparations to France. Like I said before, it's bad enough you slept with our women, but now the offspring are now sabotaging us and undermining us at the same time. It's like adding insult to injury, man. Let's continue. Arguing that Dessalines had betrayed the prize of freedom, the Southern generals promised a true liberty based on the rights and duties of all. Soldiers will be paid, cultivators protected, and planters have their property respected. As authors of the document, they describe themselves as merely the vessels of the will of the Haitian masses rather than political conspirators. Now, time out. Who's to say that this whole conspiracy, who's to say, because these guys are the sons of white men, they probably got, white cousins and white half-brothers and white grandfathers and white godfathers and white uncles. Who's to say that they haven't been, keeping in contact or corresponding with their family in France, right? Sabotaging, let's conspire against the blacks. Who's to say that didn't happen? Who's to say that didn't happen? Because later on, when Christophe would become king, the French government would conspire again with the Southern generals to say that, listen, if Christophe ever attacks you, we're going to back you up militarily. That happened later on, years later. When Christophe was in power, the French government told the Southern mixed race generals, listen, if Christophe ever attack you, we got you. We got your back. We're going to send a squadron. So who's to say that the French weren't involved in this plot to overthrow Dessalines in concert with their mixed race sons? I'm just throwing things into the pot. I'm just speculating, right? But let's continue. Declaiming any personal ambition, they pledged that the army would not rest until it had placed at the head of the government a man whose courage and virtues we have long admired, and who, like us, was the object of the tyrant's humiliations. At the very moment that Dessalines was heading south to confront them, Henri and Pétion announced Christophe as the new head of state. Now, time out. You see, the mulattoes down south, they believed that Christophe was more malleable. Christophe was more receptive, and he would be a good puppet. They said that Christophe would be a good puppet president. He'll do our bidding, right? We'll operate from behind, right? We got the white man's money. We the white man's son, so we got the old money from the colonial period. We sacked up, we racked up. So Christophe is gonna be, our puppet. But they don't know, man. Christophe is a real black man. He's not gonna be nobody's puppet. And Christophe got his own money too. And in fact, Christophe probably got more money than y'all. Even though Christophe is new money, Christophe probably got more money than y'all, and y'all owed money. So listen, Christophe gonna turn the tables on them very soon. Let's continue. The manifesto's authors knew that it was just words unless backed up by further decisive action. Dessalines had to be removed. The opportunity came on the 17th of October when Dessalines had left the town of Ocaé on the road towards Port-au-Prince. He was riding ahead of his trusted 4th Regiment with only a light bodyguard, unaware that the city had already risen against him. It was only when he reached the bridge at Pont Rouge in a wooded area on the outskirts of the city that he realized he was heading into a trap. Soldiers with fixed bayonets sprang from the trees to surround him, along with Henri and General Yayu, who had once been a follower of both Sans-Souci and Petite Noël Pierre. Oh shit. Oh man. Remember the Maroons from part 5? You see, Dessalines had killed Petite Noël Pierre, and Christophe had killed Sans-Souci. So Yayu had clicked up with the mulattoes down south, and now it was time to get revenge on Dessalines. So Yayu, one of the Maroons, he actually clicked up with, the mulattoes down south, and he was riding against Dessalines too. Let's continue. Pétion had chosen to remain at Port-au-Prince. Dessalines was indignant. After a brief standoff as the troops hesitated to act against the emperor, a volley of musket fire rang out, and Dessalines fell from his horse. His lieutenant, Charlotte Macadieu, attempted to protect his wounded commander, but was himself cut down by a cavalry saber. As Jean watched, Yayu administered a fatal blow. It was a cruel poetry. A former Maroon from northern Haiti, allying with the old southern free mulatto class to kill a man who had campaigned against them both. There was no ceremony of recognition, just a brutal stripping of Dessalines' corpse, with his fingers cut off for the jeweled rings, and the dismembered body left abandoned in the road. Damn, man, the Maroons also got vengeance, man. The Maroons, they finally got vengeance for, Sans-Souci and Petite Noël Pierre. Let's continue. Only later was it recovered by a woman named Défilé, a devoted follower to Dessalines, who, according to Haitian tradition, placed his remains in a sack and buried him in an unmarked grave, weeping in fear for the fallen country that she believed would be left behind in the wake of his murder. Henri was keen to press on the town of Machan to seize the imperial treasury, but Pétion's cooler head prevailed. Rather than proceed north, they attended a Thanksgiving mass in Port-au-Prince and then wrote to Christophe to explain their actions and pledge him their loyalty as Haiti's new leader. Henri blamed the heightened spirits of his men for the mutilation of Dessalines' body, insisting that they were trying to arrest the emperor when he foolishly reached for his pistol in self-defense. Otherwise, the tone was entirely unrepentant. Pétion then wrote to Christophe and said, "We should not have concluded our work, General, if we had not been penetrated with the recollection that there existed a chief calculated to command an army with all the latitude of power, of which until now he had only the appearance. It is in the name of the whole army, always faithful, obedient, and well-disciplined, that we beseech you, General, to assume the reins of government."
and enable us to enjoy the plenitude of our rights and of that liberty for which we have so long fought. Now, them boys down south, the white man's son down south, they think they're about to weaponize Christophe to use as a puppet leader while they govern from the back. But they gonna see, listen, that plan is not gonna be effective. Let's continue. As Gérin and Pétion took up their pens, a different narrative was being crafted just north of Port-au-Prince by Christophe's ally, André Vernet, the Minister of Finance. Alongside Just Chanlat and Boistonnerre, he wrote a furious declaration lamenting the tyranny of parricide carried out against the nation's founding father and vowed to avenge the emperor or die. This document was also sent north to Christophe, along with a separate letter from Vernet describing the events around Dessalines' killing. The question was, which account of Dessalines' killing would reach Christophe first, and which side would he ally himself with? Vernet's dispatches were the first to arrive. Christophe immediately wrote back, describing the great pain he felt on learning the news of this fatal accident, so disastrous to the country. The emperor's death seems to have taken him by surprise, but given the eagerness with which Gérin and Pétion appeared to place themselves in service to Christophe as new head of state, the question has always remained as to what he knew about the conspiracy against Dessalines. In the early 1840s, when a Haitian writer, Thomas Maju, was compiling his epic history of the country, he interviewed many of the surviving propagandists from the independence era and claimed that Christophe was fully aware of the plot against Dessalines. Now, keep in mind, Thomas Maju, like I said, yeah, he was Haitian, but he could pass for white. So like I said, you know what side he was on. He was on the side of the Southern mixed race generals. So obviously he would be against Christophe. So we got to take his historical account with a grain of salt. Let's continue. Maju had wrote as a Republican partisan who was highly critical of Christophe and his later royal pretensions. And in his account, Christophe had already conspired against the emperor with Gérin's predecessor in L'Écaille, General Nicolas Geffrard. Now, Thomas Maju, never really been a fan of his historical account of the country. You know, even in this book, they said he was a Republican partisan. He was down with the Southern Republic. You know, he was a son of a white man. These sons of white men, you know, we got to take their words with a grain of salt. You know, back in those days, you know, they had a lot of prejudices against the black man during that time. So we can't really trust them as credible sources. Let's continue. Only Geffrard's untimely death in May 1806 had prevented an earlier move against the emperor. His source was Dessalines' inspector of agriculture in the south, Joseph Ingignac, who reportedly discovered a cache of letters from Christophe to Geffrard complaining about Dessalines' rule. Now, Joseph Ingignac, that was somebody else who also later allied himself with the Southern Republic of Haiti. These is a bunch of Southern Republican boys. Like, these is not the black Haitian rebels from the north. You know, these the Frenchy, you know, mixed race boys from the south. And unfortunately, their narrative has been a dominant narrative running in the country for the past 200 some odd years. Anyway, let's continue. Maju had admitted that the plot was hearsay, but his need to make sure that Christophe's hands were equally dipped in blood have colored all subsequent accounts of the events at Pont Rouge. You see, even in the book, they say Thomas Maju was biased and probably was bullshitting. Man, you know, pardon my language, but, you know, seriously, you know, these Southern Republican, you know, half white, Frenchy, my daddy is a white man, boy, we can't take your words as the gospel. I'm sorry. You know, I'm sorry. Let's continue. On the day Dessalines was killed, Christophe wrote to General Romain, who had overseen the dispatch of Capa only days earlier, to advise that, with Dessalines moving against the Southern insurrection, he should increase local surveillance to foil the plans of any malicious men. No other Northern generals received such orders. Christophe's regular correspondence was only interrupted with the arrival of Vernet's news on the 19th of October. His shock reply was dashed off so quickly that the handwriting changes halfway through the letter. The neat copperplate of his usual secretary, Julien Prévost, suddenly disappears to be replaced by the looser and more urgent hand of another. Christophe sent a further 3 letters to Vernet that day, urgently asking for more updates and ordering that the capital at Marchand and the imperial family be protected. He sent general orders written with tears of blood to all his divisional generals with the news and ordered their troops to be placed on high alert. Particular attention was paid to the garrison at Saint-Marc, the closest city to the border with Haiti's western province. Christophe sent a further 2 officers direct to Port-au-Prince with a letter for Pétion asking for more details about the killing. He wrote of his dismay on learning of Dessalines' death and expressed his trust that Pétion would do whatever he could to prevent potential disorder in the ranks. Christophe's letters to Vernet and his officers were passionate, but his tone to Pétion was cool and businesslike. Since the siege of Jacmel 6 years before, there had been no love lost between the 2 men. When Christophe was made head of the army in 1805, it took Pétion 3 weeks to write to congratulate him and a further 3 weeks for Christophe to reply. According to Christophe's letter book, this was the only correspondence that they had exchanged in the previous 18 months. The northern and southern halves of Haiti had long operated on parallel tracks, and Dessalines' assassination now threatened to pit the two against each other again. Man, the north and the south, man. The black man up north, the black rebels up north, and the rich mixed race son of the white man down south. You know, that's been the story since 1796 when Villat bust into the governor's house to arrest Lavaux. And let's continue. Christophe had not yet received word that Pétion intended to nominate him as head of state, but Christophe was not likely to agree to the wholesale land reforms that the Southern generals had proposed in the declaration. Christophe made no public announcement about the killing of the emperor, but sent cavalry and artillery to secure strategic roads across the north. He wrote to Dessalines' wife to offer his condolences and spoke of the anxiety he felt over her husband's death. Addressing her as his godmother, he told her that despite the great project of our enemies to split the country in two, he would do all he could to avoid any further shedding of blood. As soon as I am allowed to be absent from my command, you will see my flying out to you, adding his wife Marie-Louise's tears to his own. Pétion also wrote to the Empress, but his letter offered no soft words, just the idealism of his manifesto against tyranny. He explained how Dessalines had profaned his title, so the sacrifice of her husband had been a necessary one. Man, the son of the white man, emulating the same callousness and coldness of his father, of his white father. Let's continue. As he praised her personal virtue, Pétion asked her to forget who she had been married to, and in the name of the army, offered her instead the cold comfort of becoming the adopted wife of the entire country, which knew no hatred except against one oppressor. When Christophe finally received Gérin and Pétion's manifesto and accompanying letters, he wrote to Vernet to say how they had troubled him, and he would need to reflect carefully on their content. Without giving any indication of his unlikely course of action, he urged his comrade not to be afraid, but to keep confidence in him and his military strength. But his mind was made up. He may not have played a part in Dessalines' demise, but he would not fail to take advantage of it. He summoned his generals to Milo and presented them with the evidence from the south. In response, they pledged him their loyalty and urged him to take up the reins of government. It will not be a chief that we will have, they wrote. It will be a father surrounded by his children who will aspire to nothing but their happiness and their prosperity. The choice of language was carefully measured. In Christophe's private letters, he continued to respectfully refer to Dessalines as His Majesty, but in recognition of the changing situation, he now allowed the publication of a declaration that referred to the emperor as the head of a hydra that was about to devour us. On the same day, he made his first replies to Gérin and Pétion to accept the position of head of state. Judging their actions to have been a cruel necessity, he was prepared to answer their call to the honorable and painful place of government. He repeatedly underscored his lack of ambition as he undertook to serve the country, but nonetheless showed that he would now not merely react to events, but would seek to shape them himself. He called for order from the southern and western armies, subtly mentioning that his own soldiers were freshly paid in provision. Christophe also demanded a new constitutional settlement to be agreed by a National Assembly. He said, I will tell you the time and place where this assembly should be held and the number of members who should participate. Picking the noble, enlightened, and friendly men who would make up this body would be crucial to shaping the new political landscape. Crucially, Christophe refused to travel to Port-au-Prince. Instead, he had Pétion send his envoy, General Bonnet, by ship to the north. In a careful piece of political theater, Bonnet was summoned to meet him at the citadel. This meeting did not go well. Christophe had just learned that two of Dessalines' secretaries, Etienne Monteur and Boistonnerre, the man who had put iron in Haiti's Declaration of Independence, had been executed in Port-au-Prince. Christophe angrily accused Bonnet of trying to hide these crimes and loudly claimed the insurrection against Dessalines had been driven by Southern ambition rather than principle. Bonnet retorted that had that been the case, they would have simply driven north and overwhelmed Christophe's troops. The meeting degenerated even further when Christophe discovered that Pétion had subverted Christophe's authority as head of the army by quietly placing one of his own supporters in key army positions. Christophe said, "Do I not have the right to make promotions? I, who have been proclaimed head of the government. Well then, I will also make myself strong, and I will not let my throat be slit like Dessalines." Any fragile trust that might have existed dissolved into suspicion and accusation. When Bonnet left for Port-au-Prince, he refused Christophe's offer of a military escort and later reported to Pétion that northern troops had tried to ambush him at Gonaive. See, Christophe was like, listen, what? Nigga, I'm gonna kill you when you get out of here, bro. You see, they're like, bro, listen, you can't talk to, what I tell y'all in the last episode, I said, you cannot come to Christophe talking crazy. You heard what he said to Christophe. He said, listen, if that was the case, we could have just invaded the north and overwhelmed your troops. So Christophe was like, what? Nigga, what? And they said when he was leaving the city, he was ambushed at night. They tried to kill him on his way out. Listen, you can't be talking to Christophe any type of way, man. What's wrong with y'all, man? What's wrong with y'all, man? Let's continue. The raised temperatures did not bode well, but in public, Christophe portrayed himself as the sole figure who could unify the country. In his first proclamation as head of state, he warned that the removal of a bad government was no excuse for anarchy. He praised the army for upholding the honor of the Haitian flag and pledged improved pay and equipment in return for their loyalty and maintaining order. Cultivators on the plantations, whose happiness lies in your work, were urged to keep to their labors, while the patriotism of all the citizens was called on to close ranks against any supporters of Haiti's enemies they might find and to inform the authorities of their perfidious insinuations. Who those enemies might be or why Christophe had replaced Dessalines as the nation's leader was not explained. It took nearly 3 weeks after the assassination for any sort of official narrative to appear. For some time, explained the editor of the national newspaper, discontent had been breaking out in several parts of the empire. Injustices and acts against both public and private individuals had excited a general disgust of the government, which had just been overthrown. Loyal officers had pledged to fulfill their constitutional duty to replace a bad leader. It was only their fear of violent reprisals that had led to the killings at Pont Rouge. The actions had been carried out in perfect secrecy so as to not disturb commerce and agriculture, and a new constitution was planned to correct the errors of imperial rule, which would allow all Haitians to forget our past misfortunes and enable us to enjoy the happiness for which we have long been yearning. The names of those responsible for Dessalines' death were deliberately omitted, but the newspaper advised that all the documents related to the plot would soon be released. A pamphlet containing all Pétion and Jean's letters and a manifesto was duly printed in Capa, but to maintain Christophe's image of being above such politics, none of his replies to them were included in the edition. In truth, the fight for Haiti's future had barely begun. Pétion perhaps imagined that Christophe would be satisfied to accept his new role and let the organizers of the revolt against Dessalines steer the new settlement in their favor. When Bonnet had visited the citadel, he reportedly suggested that the lesson of Dessalines' misrule was that any powers of any future head of state should be curtailed in favor of a legislature. It was clear that the road to any political settlement would be backed up by the force of arms. Pétion encouraged his own poorly paid troops to blame the head of the army for their ills. My comrades, if you have received only 2.5 goudes instead of 5, it is according to the orders of General Christophe, he told the men in their barracks. But on the other hand, be convinced that my voice will always be heard whenever it is a question of defending your rights. Now, time out. You see, General Alexander Pétion lying on Christophe because, as mentioned previously in the book, Christophe was always known to have the best paid, the most highly paid, the best dressed and well-trained soldiers amongst all the generals. Christophe's troops were known to have the best provisions and the best of everything. So for Pétion to blame his poor administrative skills and blame it on Christophe, that just shows you, man, the son of the white man just sabotaging the black man. The son of the white man back at it again, man. You know, back at it again, man. Really what happened is Pétion's troops were poorly paid because General Alexander Pétion was always known as a bad administrator, right? When he was in power, when the country was split from the north and the south. Now, later on, they're going to talk about it, right? When the country is split from the north and the south. When Pétion was ruling the south, his territory was poor, badly governed, corrupt, nothing going on, no commerce, no nothing. Christophe's territory was full of commerce, activity. Everybody was paid. Everybody was going to school. Everybody had something to do. Everybody had an occupation. So Pétion was lying, man. Pétion was lying, man. Christophe was known to have the most highly paid and the best dressed troops with the best provisions and the best of everything. So, you know, they even mentioned that earlier in the book back in like episode 2. Or maybe it was episode 3. I don't remember. But anyways, let's continue. When Christophe sent his own envoy, Dessalines, to Port-au-Prince to sound out the loyalty of the army, he was refused access on the grounds that the situation was too volatile and he had insufficient authority to continue. Christophe demanded answers. He said, "I could not expect, General, that an officer sent by the government could have any difficulty in fulfilling the mission entrusted to him." He wrote angrily to Pétion. He went on to say, "I cannot help confessing to you that I am discovering more and more the thread of all the plots and schemes which are taking place in the West and the South." Speaking of the forthcoming assembly, he expressed concern that it would be devoted solely to favoring intriguers and giving them the means to feed their passions. Pétion's reply was bullish. He denied blocking Dessalines' mission and asked to know the source of Christophe's accusations so that he could answer them. As for the Constitution, Pétion wrote that those who acted on the 17th of October did so to destroy tyranny and then change the form of government, which would not suit them at all. Pétion believed that he had good reason to be confident, as well as preventing d'Artagnan from meeting his soldiers. He had learned that General Yayu had rebuffed an attempt by Christophe to bring him to his side. Furthermore, as Christophe was writing to complain about his envoy's reception, envoys for the assembly were already arriving in Port-au-Prince. Christophe agreed that the assembly be held in this city to avoid any suspicion of him influencing the outcome. Pétion grabbed the opportunity to shape the composition. When the northern members arrived in Port-au-Prince at the end of December, they were shocked to discover that the number of delegates had unexpectedly increased from 56 to 74, with southern and western representatives making up the majority. Christophe's representatives were thoroughly outmaneuvered, accusing Pétion at one point of refusing even to tell them the location of some of the meetings they were due to attend. The new constitution was presented to them as a fait accompli. It made Haiti a republic with all legislative powers devolved to a new 24-seat Senate dominated by members from the South and the West. God damn, man. The white man's son back at it again. Let's continue. The presidency was reduced to a largely ceremonial role, and the position nominated by the Senate to serve a 4-year term. Christophe was duly pronounced president, but the northern delegates were up in arms at the stitch-up. Only one figure from the north sided with Pétion's faction to add his name to the new constitution. César Telemaque, the former mayor of Capa, who had begged Christophe not to burn the city when the French Armada arrived in 1802. Now, time out. Y'all remember, episode 4? When Christophe told César Telemaque, "You speak like a planter." Let's continue. In Capa, Christophe was furious, but perhaps unsurprised. Since Dessalines' assassination, every political move on both sides has been accomplished by the drilling of troops, and now was the time to put them to the test. Christophe's power resided in the iron of his bayonets, not the paper of a rigged constitution. Pétion's mask had slipped, and force could be the only response to his naked grab for power. "We must march," Christophe exhorted as he issued orders to the army to prepare to march south. Your general does not want to compromise with the enemies of liberty. He does not want to beat around the bush with them. He expects you, soldiers of all ranks, to do your duty as you have always done. The plot of the 17th of October had begun over southern fears for their property, but now Christophe claimed the rights to dispossess his foes of everything they owned. Christophe said, having raised the banner of revolt, it is only right that they should pay for the disastrous plots with their fortune. March on, and victory will crown the justice of our cause. His divisions poured south from Cap-Haïtien, Gonaïves, and Saint-Marc. At the town of Vacaé, he was joined by Vernet, who was eager to avenge the death of Dessalines. By the eve of Independence Day, 1807, when Haiti was barely 3 years old, 18,000 northern soldiers approached the gates of Port-au-Prince, waiting for the order to attack their fellow countrymen. Now, we could end part 6 right here. I think it's part 6. We could end part 6 right here. The black generals from the north getting ready to attack the southern mixed race boys from the south. Anyways, man, it's your boy Neferkari Dessalines back in the building. Yes, indeed. Cash App in the description. Support the album, man. Support the album. Peace.
No. Feel like I'm 75. Know that your team be full of them traders. You know that can never be mine. I'm grabbing a thought when I drive. I'm back in my zone and we young. She said that she ready to come be my wife. Yeah, hoping I don't do her wrong. I gave her my word and it's bond. I'm whipping the best like a lamb. I mean no chicken and lamb. Accustomed to call me the man. I never be up on the gram. I'm keeping that way undercover. She want me to tell her I love her. I told her I'm breaking the rules. I told her we making the news. Back in my city they loving me. Standing alone I'm 100 deep. Enemy plotting and still in reach. They try to make sure that we underneath. Trying to make sure that we never make it. Coming for power, come get acquainted. Coming for everything that I wanted. Feeling like Drake, but I really wrote it. Feeling like Kendrick, I'm checking names. Gotta roll up while I go insane. Got so much stress, I been gained weight. Stuffing these racks in this Louis case. One thing for certain, I'm about to check. Keep it 100 and nothing less. Stick with the family since day one. Had to stay down till my day come. Had to stay down, but I'm never patient. Hop on the mic and I'm motivated. Hop on the mic and I drive a classic. Haters can't see me, they copping glasses. Back in the studio making magic. Got a new tape and it's in production. Back on my business, I got a budget. Staying low key when I'm out in public. Feel like I'm 75. Know that your team be full of them traders. You know that can never be mine. I'm grabbing a thought when I drive. I'm back in my zone and we young. She said that she ready to come be my wife. Yeah, hoping I don't do her wrong. I gave her my word and it's bond. I'm whipping the best like a lamb. I mean no chicken and lamb. Accustomed to call me the man. I never be up on the gram. I'm keeping that way undercover. She want me to tell her I love her. I told her I'm breaking the rules. I told her we making the news.